Australia has often been described, both at home and abroad, as the lucky country. A rich country that boasts landscapes of unparalleled beauty and a quality of lifestyle that others can be envious of. But if you dive below the surface and really take a close hard look at Australia's history, then what you may find is not these beautiful pictures here, but something else. Tasmania had an Aboriginal population of approximately 10,000 people. Upon arrival, the Europeans began a war called the Black Line. They forcibly removed the Aborigines from their land and conducted an ethnic cleansing that killed every Tasmanian Aboriginal. This brutal history has never been taught in Australian schools, and many school children grow up oblivious to the knowledge of the apartheid that their country was founded on. It was the Aboriginals who lost not only their land, but their culture and a history that dates back more than 40,000 years. Today, too many black Australians live in tin shelters like these, which boil in summer and freeze in the winter, which have toilets if they're lucky and taps that never run. Australians give generously to Syria and Afghanistan, but their indigenous is not a cause. Here's how an international film team looked at the current situation of Australian Aboriginals.
But 200 miles to the north is the remote community of Ambladowitch,
I'm living here.
where more families are sleeping rough, even though the nighttime temperature drops to below zero at this time of year. This is supposed to offer protection from the summer sun, not the winter cold, but this is where 3 children had been sleeping. Some families have been given proper tents to stay in, but it's hard to believe other Australians would put up with being treated like this.
It's time for the international community to respond. They must hold Australia accountable for the appalling standard of living in the 21st century for Australian Aborigines. Hugh Jackman has a very clear message to his fellow Australians.
I'd only seen images of problems, whether it was drinking, whether it was poverty, whether it was health issues. That's all I knew about the Aboriginal people. Yeah. And I wanted to go back and say, hang on a sec, forget those images. You need to go out there and we need to learn.
And learn we must, so that the wrongs passed down to previous generations won't be passed on to this one.
Do you believe that the so-called White Australia policy will always be a stumbling block?
I don't think it's such a stumbling block as people pretend, but that it's important for us, I haven't the slightest doubt.
That we should maintain it the way it is?
So long as we possibly can, we ought to aim at having a homogeneous population. I don't want to see reproduced in Australia the kind of problem they have in South Africa, or in America, or increasingly in Great Britain. I think it's been a very good policy, and it's been of great value to us. And most of the criticism of it that I've ever heard doesn't come from these Oriental countries, it comes from wandering Australians.
For these views, of course, in the past, Sir Robert, you have been described as a racist.
Have I?
I have read this, yes.
Well, if I were not described as a racist, I'd be the only public man who hasn't been. That's one of these jargons, isn't it? One of these mod words. You call a man a racist.
Most migrant families soon find homes in the suburbs and begin the search for work. Manual jobs are plentiful. Matt Dickinson was a grocer in Northumberland. In Australia, he finds work with a railway gang.
You have no idea what a relief this new start is. I drew my first pay on the 24th of January. It was £19.06 for the week. My last pay in England was £7.06.
19-year-old Duncan Fisher works in a foundry in Western Australia.
There's a certain amount of hostility at work towards POMs. They say things like, the only good POM is a bloody dead POM, that sort of thing. It's taken me a long time to work out how the Australian mind works. The word bastard is a term of endearment. For instance, bloody pom or bloody pommy is an insult, but pommy bastard is okay.
Australia welcomes 100,000 European immigrants a year, but refuses entry to almost all non-white applicants. The government imposes a policy known as White Australia, which even discriminates against those of Commonwealth origin. Australian Secretary of Immigration, Peter Hayden.
Only those applicants who can be regarded as being of European origin may be permitted to settle in Australia. Australians are nervous about minorities who form ethnic colonies in our cities.
The White Australia policy provokes strong opposition from Britain and the Commonwealth. In a letter to The Times, Sally Shan from London.
It's all wrong for Australia to bar immigrants from coloured Commonwealth countries. India is overpopulated and starving, and yet when Australia needs immigrants, it goes to Germany and Greece. A few years ago, the Germans were hated all over the world. Now they're welcomed in Australia.
But it isn't just would-be immigrants who are affected by the concept of a white Australia. For decades, Australia's indigenous population, the Aborigines, have suffered racial discrimination, the removal of their homelands, and the destruction of their traditional way of life. Auburn Neville, Commissioner for Native Affairs, 1937.
The problem is one that will eventually solve itself. There are a great many full-blooded Aborigines. They are not getting enough food, and they're being decimated by their own tribal practices. In my opinion, no matter what we do, they will die out.
We have come to the end of this video. Thank you for watching. Making video is time-consuming and hard work. Kindly click the subscribe button and click the like button so as to encourage us to make the videos you like. Thank you and have a good day.